Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Screens. I'm really excited to be talking to Athena Pearce, who is the co-founder of Incantrix and a really fantastic designer of participatory live experiences. And today we're going to talk about their new show. Well, it's not that new. It's been around for a while, but the kind of full production version of Romancing Jan. We just saw a trailer or a sizzle reel, is that what we called it, for the show. And just for context, I think I've played it maybe 2 or 3 times at this point. I've played it at Intercon, and I also played it in Second Life when you did a version of it for the Slarp Fest, which was in 2021, I believe, or 2020. I'd love it if you would start at the sort of beginning of the process, because this project's been around for a while and it's gone through a bunch of different incarnations.
Yeah, so I started the project, it was that first Intercon run, and I was inspired to do the project because I'd been doing a board game afternoon with a bunch of friends, and we sat down and we played this card game called Marrying Mr. Darcy, which is a very charming card game. I highly recommend it. If you haven't played it, pick it up. The designers are amazing, and it's a great game. But anyway, I was like sitting around playing it, and I realized as we were playing it, a number of the people playing were like embodying characters while they're like handing these cards around, and it all of a sudden became so funny and interesting and dynamic, just like adding the character, feeling to it and them embodying these personas. But one of the things that I was noting about it, and one of the things that I've actually had a big problem with, like just Jane Austen stories in general, is that I really, it grates against me the gender norms that when I don't want to play in that world because I feel marginalized and limited enough in the world, even the modern world that I live in, to further take me away from my rights, and put myself back in that era. It's very hard for me to play and feel like it's fun experience for me. And so, my original version of Romancing Jan was to think about, how do I get the fun of this matchmaking, and this like wheeling and dealing of rumors and status and reputation, without it being about me as a woman being marriage chattel. And so I was like, how do I do this and create this world, in this experience, with taking that away. So the first iteration of Romancing Jan was to make it just gender, and also in the process of doing that, making it racially neutral as well. So it just became a matter of, it wasn't about your gender preference or what your gender was, or we didn't go into the backstory at that point of the iteration as to why. But in our play in Intercon, it wouldn't have mattered like what color your skin was or what country background you were from, etc. It was more about like, what is your wealth and standing, what is your reputation, what terrible rumors are people saying about you, and
what goals you have. I remember that was a big part,
that kind of thing. But I could equally be wooing, the right marriage partner for me, a woman or a man or a non-binary person. It wouldn't matter, because it was really, what I also love about that is that really elevates the fact that marriage in that time was a business contract. it wasn't about love, and that love is, and we also play with that being an aspect, and it is actually one of the things I like about Jane Austen's work is that there is this feeling of like, oh, you're very silly for actually wanting to marry for love, right? That is the romantic ideal that the women at that time were trying to fantasize about because they couldn't have it in their lives. They weren't allowed to go out and actually marry for love. They had to marry for business reasons. And so for them, that Jane Austen story was the way for them to fantasize about something that couldn't be true. So Romancing Jan was created in a way for me to take my queer self and feminist self and find a way for me to play pretend in that world and feel more empowered in doing so. And so, yeah, so that was the first iteration. And that version was like a 2-hour experience. You were assigned a character with, a couple of attributes. So we had 5 attributes we worked with, which are wit, attractiveness, cunning, wealth, and reputation. And so you would have 2 out of 5 of these traits as being the things that you're most known for, and they would affect how you related to other people. And basically it was a matchmaking game. You were out, your character had 2 traits, and you were required to find a character with 2 traits that society believed were important for you to have in a marriage match. And then I, as the GM, had the list of who were proper matches with each other. And through conversation with the other characters, you were supposed to try to deduce, 1, what are their attributes, and 2, if you think that's what society is going to suggest is the right match for you. So that was
kind of you
version,
and
yeah.
you kind of the GM as a character being the person that represents the society decision. I really liked that, and there were a couple things about it that I really liked in the first version that I played, which was first of all, even though it wasn't required, a lot of people chose to wear costumes. It was really fun to see how people interpreted the costumes through this gender neutral lens.
Yeah.
And I liked it too because I came in a sort of pretty traditional feminine Regency outfit, but that was also fine. Like there was room for that too, and that made it really nice. And also the other thing I liked about it was my character, I decided to play a slightly older character, which is also something that doesn't exist in a lot of these spaces also. So that was interesting. I was an older character who already had money, and I ended up marrying a person who was like a novelist who needed money and was, and I thought, oh, they're an artist, they'll give me some social prestige, or something like that. I also, from a game mechanics perspective, I also think that it makes a lot more sense to do it that way because, as we know from running LARPs that have gender allocations, if you don't have the right players and the right genders, the game totally breaks.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's a really good sort of a game mechanic solution as well. The other thing that really strikes me about it is that you were doing this before Bridgerton, that you were already kind of starting to think about an alternative history for a Regency world well before that show came out. And then weirdly, like, the world caught up with you, I guess, in a way. I mean, that show doesn't do the gender bending as much, although there are queer characters in it.
I wish they would.
But it definitely opened up a door for people to go, oh, we don't have to conform to shitty colonial historical narratives to be in historical worlds. Like, we can write alternative history as part of our creative process. So what happened next?
Yeah, so after that, we did get some feedback from that run, some things about tweaking the way, we established relationships. Like, one thing people felt like they kind of got dropped into the world a little too early without like having connections with other people that might help them in seeking a partner. The other thing I found out was that, like, this thing that I had just added is like an add-on game mechanic, the idea of rumors, which was just a way of people being able to come up with it was almost to help them build their own characters. It was just a game of two truths and a lie, right? So write 2 true things about your character and 1 lie about them. And then I'm going to stick that in a rumor bowl. And when cunning characters need to say something about you, they're going to come and grab a rumor, and then they're going to spread that about you. I mean, it's something that you wrote down. So it was one of the ways to like help build a character. And what I discovered right after we did a postmort on that game was that people loved the rumor bowl. They were like, what can we do to get more rumors? And so that was
So
something
good.
that I really needed to like think about and dig into on the next run. So after that, I did some slight development. I think we ran it in Second Life before I'd done the analog version, and before Bridgerton came out. And then I think
But you were already doing the correspondence version
was
though by
I?
the time we did. I think by the time we did the Slugfest, I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
sure you were.
So yeah, I mean, I think I made some notes and I put it on the shelf. I had thought about doing a live event run of it with Incantrix, where we would rent out a ballroom and do. Oh yeah, I had, because I'd actually talked to the venue about it, and then COVID hit. And then COVID hit. We couldn't do live events anymore. We couldn't gather. I had owned a gaming restaurant at that time. My gaming restaurant had to deal with COVID and then subsequently shut down. And, you know, I was in a place where I was like, I'd lost my theater access, and I was finding, and I'd lost my pub where I was connecting with people every day. And so I was trying to find some way to connect to folks again. In a physical world without us putting ourselves in jeopardy. And so I started thinking, I really started dwelling more on this romancing world. And then news started coming out about this upcoming show called Bridgerton, where they were going to be, there was going to be a Black Duke, right, as a main character. And that was such a huge thing.
Such a big thing.
And I was really curious about it. I was like, how are they dealing with this world and the difference, changing the historical context to change people's equality in their storytelling, and how does that compare with the way I had had done our world, and are they going to put any explanation towards it, and what's the better way when you're changing history, when you're doing some kind of alternate version of what people recognize as a period in time that did have all of these injustices in it, and it still does, right? What is the most sensitive way to handle that? Is it to not address it and just change things and just say, hey, we just have modern sensibilities, or is it better to explain it, etc.? So I called up my friend, Nuance Bryant, who had just watched Bridgerton, and she is a Black woman. And she had lots of thoughts about how Bridgerton handled their change. And so I messaged her and I said, hey, I'm curious, would you be willing to chat with me about your thoughts on how Bridgerton dealt with their history changes? And how that might affect this romancing world that I've created, and maybe we can, I'd appreciate your advice and your consulting on this, and how I might be able to treat my world in a more sensitive manner. And so yeah, we got together, we did some brainstorming. I hired her on as a consultant for the next version of the game. And a lot of the advice that we had started talking about, and then as I brought on some additional writers, was that it was important to her for there to be a change point in history, that there's a specific reason why our world is more equal than others, because otherwise it just feels like you're ignoring a horrible past, and we don't want to just ignore that there were terrible things. So instead we need to step aside and say, this is not our actual world. Our actual history was pretty terrible. This is a different one where other choices were made, and that's why people are more equal and have different lives. So we worked together on creating a different timeline that starts at like the 1400s and had some major changes to it, like that Christopher Columbus was not successful in his exploration. He died an unknown explorer out in the ocean somewhere, never came back, never brought, the thoughts of expansion to Spain, and they just figured exploration was not worth it. And so they gave up, right? So that was one major thing. So there wasn't major colonization from there. Another major change was that, and we decided all this change happens also by the influence of the Fae, which is a common thread through everything Enchantress Productions does. Somehow, spoiler alert, the Fae are involved in all of it. So like, and so we get the Fae involved in the British court during Henry VIII's reign, and introducing Henry VIII to the idea that he could get a divorce. And actually, you don't even have to get a divorce. There's this thing called polyamory if you wanted, right? And then when Henry VIII dies and he has this daughter Elizabeth who takes the throne, like, why are you a queen if you don't have equality? Why don't we just make women free now? And then, and then we go forward a little further into history, and we have Chevalier, the brother or Chevalier and the brother of Louis the 16th, who was historically a well-known crossdresser, and there are thoughts that she may have been a trans person. So in our history, then it becomes that queerness, basically Louis the 16th with all his power says that, sorry, it might be Louis the 14th. I get my Louis confused. Anyway, Sun King decides with all his power over the Catholic Church that time, he will take the Pope captive unless they say that homosexuality is no longer a sin. And that,
so awesome.
Being, genderqueer is also perfectly acceptable. So we have these like major points that we've had inspired by these famous people, and we put those touch points in to kind of change the course of history. And then
it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant because, first of all, it's really hard. Like, you basically rewrote the history of the world, but also it reminds me a lot of some of the like sort of, I was just in Seattle, and I got to see the Ruth Carter costume design exhibit, and it just reminds me of what she did with Black Panther, and also what they did with Coming to America too, where they just went, we're just going to make up a different version of reality that we like better.
Yeah.
And I love that, because it's like, why not? I mean, we're creators, we're creative people. Many people make up totally new worlds, and often that come with the baggage of the old world, which is one of the reasons I'm not a big Star Wars fan. But like, we can make history different. People have done it before. It's not.
Yeah, and then it makes it more welcoming, right, for folks to come in. And it's not going to be welcoming for everybody, right? Like, I worked with, like I said, I worked with Nuance, who is a Black woman. I also then, one of my first writers was Elizabeth Upshur, who still works with me to this day. And she is also a Black woman who actually studied, has a master's degree in English and history as well, and actually studied the slave trade to trace, right, the actual route that her ancestors took from Western Africa to the US. And so when I added her to the team, she said, I would really like to recreate history that, what does it look like if we removed that? And who are the powerful countries in West Africa, and what do they do, right? And so we got her recreate history there. We hired Rihanna, who's an amazing Cherokee woman. She rewrote the history based on her, nation's perspective in that, region, but she stuck to just her region. And so one of the keys that we had, and one of the reasons why the entire world hasn't been rewritten yet, because we want to be very careful about every time we introduce talking about a new region, that we are making sure that we're hiring consultants and writers that have actual Indigenous ties to that area so that they have a hand in rewriting their own history. That was like super important. It's very important to us. And we do, and we have gotten some pushback from some folks that this is, that sometimes that isn't what sometimes people don't like revisionist history, which is understandable. And that's not always the solution for everybody either. And so we get that it's not going to be for everybody, but we have also given the opportunity, that several people that have played our game, that have written for our game, of various backgrounds, have come to us and told us and that they really like the chance that they get to see themselves in this fantasy, and be able to have an alternate version of the world, right, to enjoy. So I think that's the important thing. And of course, we want to continue to be as sensitive and careful about that, and include as many voices as we possibly can in those decisions and in that growth, so that we're continuing to rebuild the history in a way that is more empowering, right, for the people who are involved, right, and who didn't get that opportunity the first,
and who are excluded by the real history, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So COVID came and you had this brilliant idea. Oh, people in Regency era used to write a lot of letters.
Yeah, exactly, right? How did they deal with the fact that they weren't allowed to go and hang out at balls, etc.? And so I said, we can't connect to each other physically. So what if instead we played Romancing Jam by sending letters to each other back and forth? So I created I needed to come up with a way that we have some kind of central touch point. So I thought of the idea of this newspaper and newsletter that comes out once a month, and it has the list of everybody that's playing, so you know who you can send letters to and know a little bit about them, to kind of and then it's filled with other stories in it. And I pulled actual extant articles from many of the papers of that time, and then I adjusted them where they needed to be so that it would actually fit into our altered world. And then in some cases we created completely new articles that took into consideration these people who had decided to play with us so that their characters were included in this world. And then also were like some of our own original NPCs that we would put in there. So now you have a way of like knowing who to talk to, what to talk to them about. You've got some world stuff happening that you could be chattering about. You have a way to find out rumors and gossip about each other, because there would be like scandal sections of it, or just like, oh, did you know that so-and-so was seen the other day with this other person, right? And yeah, we ended up, we did it, we ran it for about a year. So I started it up. We got the newspaper out. It also had to go through a lot of revisions. There was a lot of like, here's the way I think it's going to work. And then there's how complicated it actually is to get anything through the US postal system on a timely manner in the middle of a pandemic, which was a whole nother kettle of fish. But what it ended up creating was just beautiful. I love the fact that I've got this very real, I probably have several right here, like very real.
The newspaper is so cool.
I have my newspaper. And then I had like boxes of letters from people, and people would just get so creative with it, right? Everybody has their own like wax seals, or the paper they would choose, or the like washi tapes they would put to decorate it. They would create art pieces for each other. And one of my players would carve scrimshaw pieces and send those through the mail. People would get pressed flowers and gifts, and yeah, it was really neat to see how people took that and then went with this way of connecting with each other through the mail.
Are you still running it, or?
No, we had to turn it off. It was far more expensive to run than what I had originally intended it to be. I had budgeted for.
Sounds really labor intensive.
Publishing a monthly magazine is a job. Who knew? That's a thing that people actually get paid to do. And so and there's a whole lot of work and project management and everything involved in just that bit. But then there was also the processing mail and everything that it actually ended up becoming much bigger project than I had anticipated and expected. And so, yeah, it got a bit too much to handle and overblew my budget. I am very insistent on making sure that anybody who does work for me is getting paid at least, minimum paid wage in Massachusetts standards, because that's where I live. So I don't pay anybody less than $20 an hour that works for me. And so, yeah, it became expensive and pretty unwieldy and hard to manage at the right. I think one of the things is always trying to find your balance between the cost of running and creating something and having the right number of players to make that cost break even, but then also not become more work than you can handle, right? Like there's this really difficult balance that I feel like we often have to deal with in any production we're doing.
Yeah, I think this is really a big issue with participatory live work, is that it requires people, and it's not a like make one sell many model. You have to have humans there to interact with your audience, participants, whatever. So COVID, you got into the situation abated and you were able to do this full production, which I should add for those who are not aware that I was supposed to go to, but I could not because I got COVID. I was quite devastated, and I was so happy to get the newspaper and read the newspaper, and it just made me feel just a little bit better about missing the experience. But the newspaper was super cool. I really liked it.
Yeah, it was the thing, I think, right, like the live experience, we discovered rumors, right, when we first ran it, and then we're able to incorporate that in future versions, including the paper, and then the paper came out of the letter version, and now I'm in love and obsessed with the paper. And so, that I really wanted, so we ran the letter game, we knew we were going to need to end it because it had become too unwieldy. But we wanted a nice way to like wrap it up with a bow and give the opportunity for the people who'd been playing. Like, we had some people who had been dedicated playing with us from the time we announced it to the time we closed it down. A few of them we wanted to give a chance to actually have this end in a chance for them to meet and get to like actually see these people and these characters they interacted with in life. And so I finally got the opportunity to bring about the vision that I'd had for it being a ball in a mansion, but now it was even bigger than my original thought before COVID, because now we had all of this year of development basically to put into it. So, we were able to create a newspaper for the event itself. Physical invitations went out. So it looked like very fancy wedding invitations. We had dance cards made up, and they those two bunch of extras. But yeah, we had like dance cards made up, so those went out in the mail or were delivered on the day of, and then you could write down who you're dancing with. It was going to be outside, so it's also a fan, which is helpful. And then it could be a memento, right? I love to make sure that people always have something they can take away from an Encantrix event that's a tangible reminder of what they did. And so, we had these great, after a year of running a physical game, all of a sudden we had these great like physical things that we could add to the experience. And so yeah, we had about 100 people come out. They enjoyed a tea time experience with croquet and
Okay.
badminton out on the garden, interacting with people and trying to solve puzzles as to, you know, what this mysterious change of stars was happening around the event, and what could that mean and portend. Fairy shenanigans, usually.
It looked like the costumes that people wore were really, really great too.
They were amazing. Like I think it was one of the things that at Enchantrix we love the opportunity to give our audience a chance to play with us, and part of that is dressing up. Like I love to dress up. So many of us in the theater community and geek community live for Halloween. And so if we can give you a way to make Halloween last all year long, we will try our best. And I love about like this one, you know, this event was very much strongly just kind of gave people that opportunity, but like not only just costume, like it could just be a ball gown, like just wear something that makes you feel pretty, I think is what we wrote on a lot of the like invitations and notes and stuff, was just like, it doesn't have to be historical. We're not historical. Like we mentioned some things that are historical, but you know, we're an alternate history. So don't worry about being historical. Worry about like just what makes you feel regal for the day, and wear that, right? And people did exactly that. So yeah, it was fantastic. We hired an opera singer, Rachel, who actually had been one of my writers and been helping me with running the game for the past year, and is also a professional opera singer. We ended up hiring a live band who were also amazing, and a dance caller. Ron, who's also an amazing LARPer, and was one of the playing one of the roles in the event as well. And like it just really added it to it. And of course we've got this venue, the MIT IndieCade house which I am obsessed with.
So you said, isn't that where you ran Crown Me?
Yeah, that's where I ran.
So we did Crown Me.
We've done I think two different great balls there. Yeah, I love this space, and their food is excellent.
It's really great.
So yeah, and this event in particular, it just felt really right for, and the fact that like we were still in COVID times, right? We still are. And so we wanted some place that would look right and have the right feel, but would have those gardens. And so they have this giant garden, they have a massive patio, and that's where most of the event was. So that people don't have to worry about being indoors in close space with people. Yeah, I think the only part of the event that was indoors was like if you went in to get drinks from the bar, or we did some dance lessons inside in the ballroom, but then the main dancing of the evening was outside. So yeah, it kept it very comfortable for most people, could just stay outside and not miss anything.
Now I forgot to mention that in between the letters and the live full production was of course the Second Life version, which we ran twice. I think we already have another show about that, because I interviewed you about it when we did the SLARP Fest show. But one thing that I would think would be really interesting to hear about, and just for people that aren't familiar with this, we did a little mini LARP festival in Second Life during the pandemic. And I specifically asked Athena to adapt Romancing Jan, because Second Life has a lot of user-created content around Regency dances, costumes, buildings, and it sort of had a built-in toolkit, including avatar animations for the dances, which were the hardest part to me of playing the real live LARP. Yeah, so we ran that twice. So what I want to hear about today was there anything you learned from that process that was useful to you in creating the real life iteration of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were a couple of things, like for me, being able to, the setting, right? Like being able to drop us in an actual like Regency looking house in the Second Life event really just like brought home to me that I needed to be in the right space when we did, you know, the live event. The same thing with the dancing. People loved in the second, right? Even the Second Life, the fact that you can do partner dances in Second Life is such a cool discovery for me. But as much as people used it, it made me think, okay, then we really need to make sure that we have some like planned and taught dances at the live event so that people can experience that aspect of it. And that becomes more of that moment and more of that experience. I think the other thing was we did get a little bit more of experience with the Rumor Bowl in the Second Life version had transferred into, like, we had actually a list of information, not only things that the players had sent in about themselves, but things that we had created about those characters because they were pre-created characters. And then we used basically an AI bot to spit those out. And with the exception of one run where AI bot didn't work, and then we had a person actually just typing them. Or no, copy pasting. I think she did.
I think for part of one of them, I was doing that actually.
Yeah, I think it was you.
I was the rumor bot. Yeah.
But people, right? It was once again like that. And so we, for the live event, we actually had a giant spreadsheet of rumors that were not just the rumors about the player characters that were there, but also a lot of rumors about our NPCs. So in the live event, we could add a lot more NPCs to it, because I could bring a bunch of actors in that I didn't have in the Second Life version. And then we just had all this other information that we could spread about.
And also, I guess the actors could become the rumor generation engine. Yeah. That's so cool. How many actors were there in the run that you did at IndieCade?
We did, I think there was a staff of 10. I think there was 10 actors there. That tends to be the number that we run with typically.
Yeah, it's interesting, the ratio of actors to players. Like we had 20 actors in the fun fair, I should say have, because it's still running. And the audience sizes that we got that tended to work really well were like 20 to 30. So that was like a 2-to-1 ratio or 3-to-1 ratio to actors, which is a very high ratio, like, or a very low ratio. Like most shows, the ratio is much lower of actors to audience members. It sounds like yours is about 1 to 10.
Yeah.
I feel like in a LARP where players have more agency to push the story forward, you probably don't need as many actors. But I'm curious what you think about, like, what are the differences in the experience and the sort of texture of the experience when you do have live actors as part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is what we use our actors for is a lot of helping the attendees realize what play they're allowed to engage in, right? Like, so for a lot of our stuff, like our actors are often, like the pub crawls we're running right now, our actors are mainly puzzle givers, right? And at the live event, we did have 1 or 2 puzzle giver actors. Others were basically like information, or you could go to them to get things that you needed, like maybe you needed more rumors, or maybe you needed money to help another actor, right? Like, so they were, what we utilize them for is really to like help the attendees lose themselves in the moment and find things to do to help them do that. But it's not, in our events, it's not necessarily required, right? We like to create the events like there are plenty of people who went to the Romancy Jan event. They ate, they went and played croquet, they sat around in a beautiful garden, they ate some more food, listened to some music, and went home, and probably didn't learn anything about fairies or kings and queens, or girls who are trying to run away with their opera star boyfriend, right? Like, none of that. They may not have been aware of a single bit of it, but that's fine because they were having fun with that. But we like to use our actors as a way of, like, if you're looking for more activity or fun, right? So it really lets it, I think the ratio that we have set up has this way of letting the person who's coming to experience determine for themselves if they want or
How
even
much more?
need to be guided, right? So they might, right, our actors might just be background decoration to them, or they might be actually what they want to go seek out to really get a bunch of juicy information or activity to do or whatever. And so I think, you know, having the right ratio can actually influence how much your attendees feel like they need to be doing something. Like, because if there's actors everywhere, then they might feel more pressure to be interacting all the time.
Yeah, and also there's an interesting thing. I feel like, at least for something like Funfair, which is the show that I just set into motion in Seattle, with Dacha Theater, it's the actors are the focus. Like the characters played by the actors are the focus, and there's not audience roles. The audience can get as involved as they want, but it's about the characters in the ensemble of actors. And so I think that's why part of the reason the ratio is a little higher, because in order for the audience members to have a satisfying amount of contact with the actors, there need to be able to do, like, we sort of figure, because it's a carnival, you could do 3 people, 4 people, even 5 people at a time with 1 or 2 actors. But if you got much more than that, then they wouldn't really have a satisfying experience. So whereas in a lot more of a LARP structured event like you did, the audience is the actors.
Yeah, they can be their own actors, right? They can be their own entertainment, right? We're kind of setting it up for them to just set the world for them, and they can just play pretend without us, even if they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
I just want to
Well, the other thing that struck me when you were talking too is, I mean, as someone who does a lot of vintage costuming, right? I go to a lot of events that are not role-playing focused, where we're just there trying to be in the ethos of the period. It's mostly what we do is 1920s, but like we get the costumes, we sit on the beach, or we go to the old house and we dance and we do all these things, but nobody is really trying to play a character, right? So, and a lot of the people I know that do that are not interested. Like a lot of them know Kellyanne because she's part of that scene as well. Like, they don't want to go to Dross because they're not interested in playing a game in costume. But part of what I like about that model is I think that it's great if people just want to come and be an extra.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the line we're trying to balance, is to make those people feel like they're welcome to come. We're not going to bother you and force you to play anything, right? You literally can just hang out and be aesthetic
in the world,
right? Like,
and live in the world.
And do you just like all things Regency? Cool, just come hang out. You don't have to solve a puzzle. You don't have to talk to an NPC. And we even have surveys. We had a survey that went out ahead of time that said, how involved do you want to be, right? Like, are you coming because you're interested in these things, or do you just want to come and be like, just hang out and have some dinner and stuff? And we get a mix. We tend to be stronger. We tend to get people who want to be like in the middle ground, right? They want to participate a little bit, but they don't want a ton of pressure. But we do get some people who just say, I'm just here for a drink and dinner and to dress fancy. And we're like, cool, that works too.
I think also having I think that for me, especially because as a teacher, I try to teach to a variety of cognitive styles. I also try to design to a variety of social styles. So like, and that's one of the things I really like about Drosselmeyer and about some of the stuff of yours that we've done, that you can do puzzles, or you can interact with actors, or you could dance, or you can, like, it has a wide range of types of interaction that it allows for, so that people get there, and if they're not into solving puzzles but they are into the matchmaking or the gossiping, they can engage with some other aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do that. I do that on purpose, and I like and it's something that Caro and I talk all about a lot of times when we're designing things together as well, because we are trying to reach a wider audience. I am also a very oddly enough an introvert in social situations, and I have to have an activity to do at a party, or I cannot just mingle. It's not in my DNA. I don't know how to do it. but give me a character to pretend to be or whatever, and all of a sudden I have a reason to be there, then I know what to do. So I like, it comes a little bit from like, I also need this kind of guidance to be comfortable in social situations. And so it's like, surely there's other people out there that need that. And so we try to find like, what are those, right, folks, what are those comfort places for people?
And I think,
like,
I think cosplay
and
the research I did about cosplay previously, like I made a little short documentary about Dragon Con several years ago, and I was just writing about it in the book that I'm working on now, that there is a sense of the costume also does that for people, right? It, first of all, it automatically creates affinity. Like if you go to a costume event, then you know that other people in that kind of costume have things in common with you. So it gives you a reason to interact with them. And then on the craft side, on the productive play side, especially because a lot of the people that I hang out with in cosplay arenas are sort of making their own clothes or assembling them from found parts. And then there's all this conversation about, where did you get your starched collar and your boater hat? Or, you know, is that a real 20s dress or an 80s 20s dress? And then that becomes, again, in the sort of Nordic LARP sense, an alibi for interacting with people. The costume itself is sort of creates a medium, an interface for interaction. So that's also kind of, I think, just a built-in thing of any kind, as opposed to something where you're doing like a LARP, a non-costume LARP, say at Intercon.
Absolutely. I feel like it's that other step, right? When we talk about like game design, like magic circle, what is that thing that's going to help you step into that circle? For some people, if I put somebody else's clothes on, I'm no longer distracted by the outside world. I can actually enter in this circle and be here with you, right? So,
and you know, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about at the beginning about the inspiration of that card game, because this is something that I noticed when I first started working as a playtester in the early 80s. I saw people do that thing you were describing. I saw them change their personalities while they were playing a game, even though it wasn't a role-playing game. And that seemed really exciting to me, that like, oh, this person who I know is very nice and soft-spoken has just become a vicious competitor in this game. And that power of being able to just transform your personality that way, and having the freedom to experiment, is one of the things that really kind of got me hooked on being a game designer. So it's really fun. So what do you think? I know you guys are doing, for people who are in the Boston area, Encantrix is doing a bunch of pub crawls out in Malden, in the Malden Gaming District, which has become a major benefactor of various game projects in the area.
They've been amazing. They're really great.
And there was just an article published yesterday in the Northeastern paper about the AR game that we designed for them. So if you're in Boston and you want to check out some cool Encantrix stuff, go to the Encantrix website and check out these pub crawls. They're really super fun. They're outside, so they're very safe. And the costumes are super fun. My partner loves to get dressed up, so any excuse to get dressed up, he will jump on in a hat. Just like you said.
Great. So you can just dress like you normally do and just wander from place to place, or you can go full steampunk aesthetic if you want, or anything.
Whatever. We just, any excuse to dress up. I think it's interesting too, because with Gene, I got him into this stuff on the costumes, right? That was the thing that hooked him. But now he's really into playing the games. And, you know, when we did the pub crawls with you guys last summer, I guess it was now, or was it? No, they were in the fall. He was really into the gameplay and the characters and the puzzles. And I remember we had this really great moment. I'm sure you heard about it from the actor, where we were going to put something in somebody's drink on the bequest of someone else. And we changed our minds and we went back to the first person and we're like, you know what? We've had a change of heart and we're not going to do this. And it was very funny. And she got very upset with us. But we were like, we talked to the guy and we're like, no, we actually think he's okay. And we don't want to fuck with him like that. It was so fun.
It's awesome.
I think that also, I wanted to ask you a little bit about emergent behavior, just kind of as a way to wrap the conversation up, like, was there anything, or can you give me some examples of things that happened in a live experience that you ran into that you were surprised by? Wonderful things that happened, or weird things, or scary things, or bad behavior that you hadn't anticipated. Um, that's my favorite part of this, is like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I didn't think of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there was much of that. I mean, I would say that like we run into emergent behavior stuff frequently in our events. Like, it's just like most runs, I'm like, oh, I didn't expect this to happen. And then, a thing happened. I would say that like I underestimated. So this time we, oftentimes in our events, we'll have some special scene thing happens that gets dropped, hints at various places. And then all of a sudden at a time, a special scene happens. I think maybe due to the nature of this event and how freeform for the most part it was, I did not expect the entire event to show up for that scene that was like hidden off in the garden area. And I had thought like, oh, like maybe 20 people will come and look at this. So this is plenty of space to do it. Like, no, like almost all 100 people showed up for this moment, which then like, I was not set up for the sound and lighting or, of it. It was like, I feel like it kind of hit a dead note. It was okay. But as a reviewer of my own work, I was not happy with it. But anyway, but I think that was one of those things, was like, I didn't think about how in this event, because so few things were scheduled moments, it meant that when we did do something, it went off through the crowd like wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
Also, maybe because our event was about rumors and people get super excited about those rumors. And so as soon as something actually happening that there's a rumor about, boy, did that go like through the crowd. And then all of a sudden everybody's up and moving and getting to where it's happening. So I would say that was the biggest like surprise of the evening, but otherwise I think I was just pleasantly surprised at how much like I decided to bring out a croquet game and badminton just in case people might want to experience that during the day. And that was like actively a thing people were playing, right? And
That's great.
and so it just really, some of these things that I set there to be like, okay, let's see if we'll get that Regency Garden experience. It was enough just to be there for everybody to just kind of pick up on it. And then these activities were just happening on their own. So it was, it was really pleasantly surprised by that.
Do you think you're going to run it again?
Yes, I would like to run it again. I need to figure out some of the logistics of it. Probably adjust some of our budgeting and pricing to make sure that it is feasible. As it is a big production. And then time, but like probably next spring is probably going to be the earliest that we can make it happen. We are wrapping up pub crawls right now. And then I have just been pitched another idea that we might do this winter that sounds very cool and is inspired by some other style of fantastical things. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But then hopefully we'll get back around. We're actually in the midst of, I also run a digital video game company that I founded this past year with two other video game, veterans, Rainbow Unicorn Games. And we're actually working on the digital version of Romancing Jan.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so we're digitizing it into a reader app to like get into the lore and everything, as well as a 3D kind of point and click adventure game for phone and and then hopefully cross-platform also.
Did you ever play the Jane Austen MMOG, which name I've forgotten?
I think I downloaded it a few times and like checked it out a little bit. So so something like a little more a little tighter in game design mechanics to give a actual like scripted but choose your own adventure style narrative gameplay but then also some like collection mechanics and stuff that you see in, you know, mobile
A
and
single player game, yeah.
single player with social aspects to it. So right, the most of the experience would be your single player experience, but we would have move into like, you'd have chats where you can actually chat and game with people. We want to do some like tea houses where there's small gatherings. We don't want to do like 100 people talking at once, as there's actually a lot of science behind how many people you can deal with in a group to actually make a real connection before it gets overwhelming.
Yeah, will be.
So we, you know, we're working on those numbers, because what we don't want is just we want it to be an intimate experience. We want it to be manageable, and we don't want it to be, we want it to be a positive community experience and not a negative one. So we're working on some of that, but the idea is, for the most part, you're playing like you would a single player game, but we want to give places where you can also interact occasionally with other people, so you do still feel like it's a living a world and an excuse to chat with other people about your experience, right?
Yeah, that's very cool. I don't think we have any people in the chat, which is common. We usually get a lot more uptake after the show, when we put the recorded archived version up. But was there anything else you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on already?
I don't think so, not that I can think of. Yeah, we're still we're plugging away. So you like pub crawls, come talk to us. We've got 2 more this month and 1 in September.
Let me I'm gonna put your website is Encantrix Events, or what's Productions.com. So if anybody happens to be in the chat, oops, I'm not logged in. So EncantrixProductions.com. So check them out. They do amazing stuff. They're very successful in the New England, Boston region, and thank you so much for coming on the show, and I will probably see you at a pub crawl in the near future.
Thank you, Celia.
All right, take care.
Bye.